Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Mr. Tom DeWeese.
Thank you very much. I am thrilled that so many of you have turned out tonight. The issue of Agenda 21 is one I've been working on since its inception in 1992. In fact, I actually took on, I began to notice back in the late 1980s that something was very, very wrong. The environmental movement, I was really starting to worry about private property rights. And then an incredible gentleman named Henry Lamb went to a UN conference and learned about Agenda 21, and he brought several of us together and taught us about it, and we've been the spokesman trying to alert people about it all that time, and for so many years people weren't listening, because if you don't feel it, if you're not affected by it, then you don't think it really exists. And I'm thrilled to know that more and more and more people are beginning to get it. If you will bear with me tonight, I do talk very fast, because this is a huge issue, and trying to get through it and have people understand about it. If I started to talk in very slow ways and repeat it, and you would have we'd be here tomorrow. So I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes version tonight, but I want to approach this in a way I think maybe some people haven't thought about it, and as I've worked with it, I've begun to think about it in this way. And by the way, in a little bit, I'm not the only one that's going to be up here. I'm going to get every single one of you involved in this. So beware and be good. Think about it this way. There has always been some kind of a force loose in the world seeking dominion and domination over other people. Usually it's a drive for power's sake. There are these people that just have to have power over other people and dictate what they do and how they live, conquer other tribes, kingdoms, or nations, grab their resources, enslave their people, build wealth and power, and rule the world. I never wanted that kind of power. I just want to be left alone, don't you? But they're there. Kings saw it as their duty. Megalomaniacs like Napoleon and Hitler and Stalin, they lusted for that control and that power to satisfy their hatred and their mistrust and their insecurities. We had secret societies that have plotted global control for their cause, no matter how demented that might be. And each has tried to gain power in different ways, and each eventually did fail. Nobody ever has ruled the entire world. Doesn't stop them from trying. In some cases, they just pushed too far, or they miscalculated the weather conditions. Both Napoleon and Stalin forgot Russia has winters. In most cases, they simply failed to take into account that people facing such oppression fight back more passionately when their homeland and their families are threatened. And that's one way that we've kept it from happening. However, think about this. What if such power mongers could find a way to keep their aggression under wraps? We don't know about it. Out of sight from those that they intend to conquer until it was too late. No armies in the field. No guns being fired. And better yet, what if they could actually get their targeted victims to help them achieve the goal to control them? As I said, no armies in the field, no shots being fired. Instead, the people quietly pull the Trojan horse inside the walls and celebrate its arrival. What if there was a way to organize the world under a single unifying plan accepted by nearly everyone as fact and necessary? And everyone would be convinced that to oppose such a plan would be a direct threat to humanity. Acceptance of that plan would see every nation voluntarily surrendering their independence and their sovereignty to these aggressors. And they would even raise money to help for the aggressors to pay for their system of control. These new rulers would issue exact orders to be followed by all, gaining more and more power with each dictate. Think about that. And people would voluntarily forget their own history, reject their own culture, and never ask questions about it. Was it not always so, they would ask? Now, what could be such a threat, so powerful that the entire world would lie down to accept such global servitude? How about the threat of environmental Armageddon? Who could oppose the saving of the planet? What if you dared to oppose such a plan? Now, you guys would go in and say, no, I'm free, I'm independent, I have rights, I have my Constitution. And you hold it up. And the mob that has accepted this would fear such dangerous ideas. They would surround you and rip up your Constitution as they shouted to you, it doesn't matter what rights you think you have if you don't have a planet to stand on. And only a selfish zealot who would refuse to give up their creature comforts and would oppose the efforts to save Mother Earth. And that would be the end of the debate, as your new rulers look on satisfied, as their drive for control was complete, because now they would be in control of all the world's resources, the land, the air, the water, and that would leave little ability for opposition. In truth, there is such a plan. And it's all there for world domination, and it is rapidly taking over at a pace and a scope that no force of power ever experienced in history. Stalin and Hitler would be so envious. Why didn't I think of that? So powerful and so controlling is this force that so far it certainly hasn't had to fire a shot as it gains new power every day. The incredible part about this is it's no secret. Everyone in the world knows about it. The aggressors have written down every detail of their plan and have told us in their own words how it's going to work. Citizens of the world, the direct target of this plan, accept each new dictate in its name as most nations enthusiastically help to put it into place. The Club of Rome, one of the major proponents of this, a major NGO working inside the United Nations, they openly admitted their purpose and their goals, saying, quote, "The common enemy of humanity is man. In searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine, and the like would fit the bill. All these dangers are caused by human intervention, and it is only through changed attitudes and behavior that they can be overcome. The real enemy, then, is humanity itself." End quote. This is diabolical. Turn man against himself so that every aspect of human life is a threat. So in order to subjugate the entire human race, get man to imprison himself. First to be targeted, of course, would be those three pillars of freedom: free enterprise, individuality, and private property. You just diminish one of those things, freedom is diminished. So what do they call this new diabolical tool that can now lead forces of global control over all humanity, which is quickly invading every single level of our government, in our communities, and our neighborhoods? What's it called? Its name is sustainable development. The term sustainable development was first introduced to us by the United Nations through the Commission on Global Governance. Can it be any clearer what their attitude or what their plan is? The Commission on Global Governance? It was then encased in policy in a document called Agenda 21. Now, you've heard the term Agenda 21. Everybody heard it? What is it? And what does it have to do with changes in your community? Let me give you some history. In 1992, 50,000 delegates, made up of 179 heads of state, including George H.W. Bush, diplomats, business leaders, government bureaucrats, and members of thousands of non-governmental organizations converged on Rio de Janeiro to introduce to the world a document that they called a comprehensive blueprint for reorganizing human society. There has never been a purpose stated for a document more dangerous, more all-encompassing, more frightening than that. A comprehensive blueprint for reorganizing human society. Well, obviously they thought it was pretty serious stuff. And then, in September of that year, Nancy Pelosi introduced the idea to the U.S. Congress in a resolution, calling it what? A comprehensive blueprint. I've got the C-SPAN video on my website at AmericanPolicy.org if you want to see it. In 1993, the United Nations wrote in a publication about Agenda 21, they said this, they described it this way, quote, Agenda 21 proposes an array of actions which are intended to be implemented by every person on earth. It calls for specific changes in the activities of all people. Effective execution of Agenda 21 will require a profound reorientation of all humans unlike anything the world has ever experienced, end quote. 1994, the American Planning Association. This is one of the most respected planning groups in the country. And if you go on their website, they've taken some heat about Agenda 21, and they have a section on their website declaring how this is just an innocuous 20-year-old document that doesn't mean anything. This is a newsletter from 1994 put out by the American Planning Association in the Northern California area. There's an article in the back entitled, How Sustainable is Our Planning? And there is a paragraph, 5 paragraphs down, that says, quote, Vice President Gore's book, Earth in the Balance, addressed many of the issues of sustainability. Within the past year, the President's Council, Bill Clinton, on the President's Council on Sustainable Development has been organized to develop recommendations for incorporating sustainability into the federal government. Now, when they tell you that Agenda 21 has no enforcement capability, they're right. It's what's called a soft law policy. It's not a treaty, a suggestion, but they got into the federal government, and Bill Clinton put this council together, and that the purpose of it was to make it the law of the land. So it does have enforcement capability. So it goes on to say, also, various groups have been formed to implement Agenda 21, a comprehensive blueprint for sustainable development that was adopted at the UN conference. In that one paragraph, it ties the American Planning Association, which is in every single community in the country, to Al Gore and Earth in a Balance, the President's Council on Sustainable Development, and Agenda 21 as a comprehensive blueprint for reorganizing human society. In 1997, the United States created this document. This is a report to the United Nations on the 5 years after the implementation of, or introduction of Agenda 21 on the progress of implementing Agenda 21. There it is, right there. In 1998, in the Federal Register, in a report on the EPA's Challenge Grant Program, it says, this is also implementation of Agenda 21. In 2011, they updated that, put out a report on what they call the history of sustainability. This is from the EPA. And right here on page 3, Agenda 21, a comprehensive blueprint. There it is. Agenda 21 is not a conspiracy theory. It is real. And on and on and on it went over the years. Agenda 21, the blueprint, the plan, the consensus, the direction for changing how people will live. Here is the plan for the 21st century. And they were so proud of it. In fact, it wasn't until the mid-2000s that pride suddenly started to turn to denial and charges of conspiracy theory. Never heard of it. Oh, you mean that innocuous 20-year-old document that doesn't have any enforcement capability? Ladies and gentlemen, there are no blue-helmeted troops at City Hall. Ha, 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 ha. That's what we hear. What happened? Why did it change from pride to denial? Well, that's when I and the John Birch Society and others started to reveal the truth about Agenda 21 and sound the alarm bells. And soon thousands of concerned Americans started to ask questions. Suddenly, the sustainable development movement became hard-pressed to remember anything like that. Never heard of it. The fact is, by the way, the Southern Poverty Law Center has done 4 separate reports on me, calling me a domestic terrorist for telling you what I'm telling you right now. I want to have a black tie dinner every year to honor the latest inductees into the Southern Poverty Law Center's hate list. So now, why is this a threat? And how did it get into your community? To understand the true threat of Agenda 21, you must first understand that it is not an environmental policy or just a good idea for planning future development for your communities. Agenda 21 is a threat to our nation, to your local community, to you, because it is a comprehensive blueprint specifically designed to change our way of life and our form of government. That is its true purpose, and that's why they call it an agenda. The official policy of Agenda 21 is sustainable development. You hear the term used, especially in the discussions about local development, farming practices, energy use. The 3 announced principles of Agenda 21, and this is the logo that they use. Lots of times you will find these 3 connecting circles in all kinds of things. You'll find it in education documents, you'll find it in development documents and so forth. But these 3 connecting circles encompass everything in your life. Social equity, which is the main one, social justice, social engineering, changing our way of life, that's that one, redistribution of wealth. Economic prosperity, public-private partnerships, partnerships between local governments and corporations that want to play ball with all this, and ecological integrity, environment, that's the excuse for it all. That's the one that gets you. Doesn't matter how many rights you think you have if you don't have a planet to stand on. So, sustainable development policies are designed to achieve these goals. And in 2015, the United Nations held yet another international meeting with thousands more delegates. Basically, it was a repeat of 1992, and they introduced the 2030 Agenda. Now, a lot of people, when I keep talking about Agenda 21, come up and say, no, Tom, it's Agenda 2030 now. Nah. They do this every year, every few years, to keep their people rallied and keep them going. There's nothing new in Agenda 2030. It's simply a reboot of Agenda 21. What they did, as time goes by, they now have created 17 specific goals. You have a sheet of paper there that shows you the goals. And all they did was just get more detailed. That's all. That's all it is. They did the same thing in 2000. They had the Millennium Summit, and they had 8 goals for the Millennium Summit. Everything was based on redistribution of wealth. When I debated at Cambridge before this 200-year-old debating society, I was debating the former UK ambassador to the UN, the head of the Millennium Project, and the head of the Liberal Party in Parliament. This is who I was debating. And my whole issue was there's nothing that comes out of the United Nations policies that isn't based on redistribution of wealth. The president of the Liberal Party got in my face and said, I believe in redistribution of the wealth. And I looked, there was a crowd of 400 people there. I looked and I said, yours or theirs? So, how is sustainable development being used to change your government? And that's a key. You've got to understand our government system is changing. There are 3 main points of attack through the enforcement of sustainable policy. 1, destroy private property ownership and control. You cannot implement sustainable development without destroying private property. It cannot exist. It's in their way. The second thing, impose regional councils and governments, unelected councils that take government further from the people. And I will tell you that if some of the people involved in this defending it say, well, our regional council has elected officials. We have mayors, we have city councilmen, county commissioners. Yeah, but they weren't elected to be on that council. And now that they're behind the scenes with the door shut, they're not responsible for what they're doing to you. They're not elected by you for that purpose. And the third thing, how they're implementing this, is to feed the plan with federal grant money. This is key, and I'll go into some more detail on that. Now, let's start by attending a local city council or a county commission meeting, or maybe even one of the planning meetings. First, you're going to hear a completely new language than you're used to. You're going to hear them talking back and forth, using words like wetlands, conservation easements, watersheds, viewsheds, rails to trails, biosphere reserves, greenways, carbon footprints, partnerships, preservation, stakeholders, land use, environmental protection, development, diversity, visioning, open space, heritage areas, and comprehensive planning. It's all part of the new language of government. What you will rarely hear are any references to private property, free enterprise, or consideration for individual choice, how you want to live your life. You will also notice that there are a lot of faces there that really aren't local people. You wonder, who are those people? And you'll see they seem to be wielding a lot of influence in the room. And in meetings, you may notice your elected representatives giving them a lot of attention. Maybe an issue comes up and they're going, who are these guys? They are the planners, representatives of private organizations or non-governmental organizations. And they call themselves stakeholders. Now, isn't it interesting, in the English language, you want to decipher all this. I mean, you talk about stakeholders. You hear them talk. You'll look in a lot of the comprehensive plans that the communities are putting together, and you'll see references to the stakeholders. Or you'll hear them say in meetings, we met with the stakeholders. Now, to me, the stakeholders are the people who live there, paying the taxes, having to live under what they do. But that's not right. That's not who the stakeholders are. It's these self-appointed gurus on high who are dictating the policy. And they're getting their pockets filled, and they're getting political power in doing it. Stakeholders. Many of them, of these organizations, helped to write the federal grant programs in the beginning. Here's what happened. 1992, Agenda 21 is introduced to the world at the United Nations. Then, as George H.W. Bush signed on, yeah, sounds good to me, sure. These same NGO organizations, the Nature Conservancy, the Sierra Club, the ICLEI, the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives, helped write it, made it their mission to go into every community in the world and have them implementing Agenda 21. These organizations, the Audubon Society, went into the federal government. They went through the EPA, they went through the Department of Transportation, they went through HUD, other agencies, and they began to create grant programs. If the community, the grants have strings attached, very specific details that are the implementation of Agenda 21. Then, after they did that, they went into the state legislatures. They got the state legislatures to pass legislation that said communities need to do a comprehensive development plan. Now you've got city councilmen, county commissioners going, what the heck is a comprehensive development plan? The same organizations, these NGOs, came into the community and said, oh, don't worry about that. We've got it all right here in a box for you, and we've got the money too. It's free money. You don't even have to think, but sign real hard, there's 3 million copies. Yeah. The American Planning Association, as I said, the largest and most respected planning group in the nation. The APA is part of what's called the Planners Network. The Planners Network is officially run by a group called the Organization of Progressive Planners. That give you a clue? It's an association of professionals, activists, academics, and students involved in physical, social, economic, and environmental planning in urban and rural areas, who promote fundamental change in our political and economic systems. I got that off their website, by the way. And along with the United Nations, the Planners Network openly advocates that free markets and private property are not sustainable. Now, you go to their website at plannersnetwork.com and you read their statement of principles. Here's one line that says, quote, "We believe planning should be a tool for allocating resources and eliminating the great inequalities of wealth and power in society because the free market has proven incapable of doing this." End quote. Redistribution of wealth, social engineering. This is what every planner and every community actually believes. This is their goal when they put these plans together. And so what is it that they're incorporated in every program? Social justice, redistribution of wealth. Eventually, after they've brought all these plans together, they've had meeting after meeting after meeting, they announce to the community, "We have a vision for our future growth." And it's announced. And as it begins to be put in place, you're going to find the establishment of a whole bunch of new entities that you never heard of before. Water councils, energy councils, development councils, land councils, national heritage areas, conservation easements, on and on and on. You begin to hear all these things. They control the use of all of these vital needs. You're also going to see them dictating that when you build something, you're going to have to use the international plumbing codes or the international electric codes when you put something new together, what kind of materials you're going to use. You're going to see bike paths springing up, share the road, complete street, on and on. One of the main effects of this visioning plan is that private property rights begin to disappear as land use becomes tightly controlled. Taxes go up to control energy use. Community development begins to mean the use of eminent domain to tear down neighborhoods and replace them with pack and stack high-rise housing. Most importantly, as the grants and the stakeholders begin to take hold of the community, watch how the function of legitimate elected government within the sustainable system fast becomes little more than just a rubber stamp to enforce the dictates of these non-elected stakeholder councils. That gives it their legitimacy to put it together. What it is the demise of representative government. Once the councils are established, it becomes much more difficult to discuss issues with your elected representatives. You know, our founding fathers were brilliant people. And they built our nation, they built our system of government in a means that local government would have the biggest effect on you, and federal government would have the least. And, you know, the other side gets that. People implementing this, what was their, you know, back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, what was their power drive? Think globally and act locally. And that's exactly what they've done. They've put these things together. So now, I mean, it used to be you had a problem with something city council was doing, you went out and had a cup of coffee with your city councilman and said, "Charlie, what are you thinking here?" "Oh, I didn't know about that." "Okay, well, let me take a look at it." You get some kind of response, you know, depending on your relationship with them. Now, what happens? You go in and try to talk to them. Instead, they automatically refer you to the proper council or administration or department, and they are run by unresponsive appointed hacks armed with their own political agenda. Bottom line is they don't care what you think. Why should they? No danger to them. These councils begin to grow and expand in power. Eventually, regional councils are established, made up of non-elected members that are supposed to represent whole areas, many times 10, 15, 16 counties at a time, all working to impose the same policies to every community under a one-size-fits-all umbrella. Uniqueness of America is disappearing. Regionalism is designed to undermine and replace locally elected representation, and it takes government further from the people. And there are programs today primarily through HUD, Housing and Urban Development, which will automatically put your community into a region. You may, a lot of times I've been finding as I travel around the country, some local representatives don't even know that they are put in these regions. But all of a sudden, these grants, these rules, these regulations are affecting them, and they have to go by it. Let me tell you something. How many of you have heard of the term affirmatively furthering fair housing? You heard this? No. Affirmatively furthering fair housing is a program put together by Barack Obama through HUD. And what happened was, fair housing is HUD's big claim, fair housing. Westchester County, New York, an NGO organization decided to try an experiment because they looked into a grant that Westchester County had taken from HUD, and they started to look, did they comply to this grant? And they began to go down through and see, no, they didn't. They didn't comply to this, they didn't comply to that. They filed a lawsuit against Westchester County for non-compliance, and they won in court. $60 million, that was more than the grant money they took, forcing them to build more government Section 8 housing and things like that. Now, HUD hadn't been enforcing this a whole lot, and all of a sudden they looked at Westchester County and they went, huh, look at this. And they started using it as a pattern. Next thing was Marin County, California. There was a county in Iowa. There was another. They are now threatening local representatives. We've gotten every single community in the country practically to take these grants, free money. All of a sudden, they're all under HUD's thumb. And HUD agents are beginning to run your communities. The regional councils are usually the ones that apply for the grants, and yet they affect everybody. Their plans do not protect private property. In fact, they oppose the protection of private property. And the regional councils impose this one-size-fits-all these regulations without regard for local wants and needs. And fighting them is, people feel it's nearly futile. Regional councils answer to no one. They are not elected. And they make that makes them the perfect vehicle for the enforcement of sustainable policies, which, remember, have been designed to change human civilization. The grants are with the strings attached, make sure of it. The grants dictate rules, regulations, money to urban and rural communities across the country, enforcing code revisions, transit-oriented development, so-called affordable housing, corridor planning, green building codes, and climate change policy. And they use the force of eminent domain to recreate your community into the image envisioned in these codes and development plans. And let me tell you something. We have a segment of our community, of our country, that are living different than the rest of us. They live in these ethnic and low-income communities in inner cities. And what's happening with these programs is they come in and bulldoze their communities. And when they do that, there are private property ownership there. There are small businesses, mom and pop businesses, bakeries and restaurants and what have you there. They're all bulldozed. And those people are then sent away. They can't afford the high rises that are built in there. That's for the rich. And the big corporations come in and take over what businesses used to be there. And now you have these people that are stuck. They can't get out. The government says, here's your money, this is what you're allowed to live on, and here's where you're allowed to live. Is there any question why there's so much anger in these places? They have no way out. Who of them is going to say, I'm not going to take your welfare money, I'm going to try to make it on my own, without any prospects of being able to do that? Who's going to do that? Nobody. They're trapped and they can't get out. That is what local officials are telling you is a local plan. That is what comprehensive blueprint is in action. And that is what regional planning really is. And they want to make us all equal. Eventually, they're coming for your home too. Eventually, you can be equal to those folks. Take that seriously. As folks like the American Planning Association push the process, voluntary guidelines announced to reduce energy use quickly become mandatory regulations as dictated through the grant programs. today. Across the nation and throughout the world, there are regional visioning programs being put into place. You can Google it, you can look on the internet, and you will find, look for Dubai 2050, Jamaica 2050, and then compare that with Heartland 2050, which is Kansas. They're exactly the same plans. They say exactly the same thing. The one thing that they all have in common is that none of them are local. That's by design, because it's the same people implementing them. Smart growth is the term that's used in most of the cities. Now let me share this with you. Do you know what's, you hear the term smart growth, smart meters, smart, everything's smart, right? Now we think in our own minds that that means that, well, it's a smarter way to do it. It's a more efficient way. It's better. That's not true. The use of smart is an engineer's lingo. What it really means is S, specific, M, measurable, A, achievable, R, relevant, T, time-oriented. Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-oriented. That's what they mean by that. That's a plan. Engineers use it. It has nothing to do with efficiency or anything else. Smart growth planners promote their schemes by insisting that Americans live the wrong way, and they use land use regulations to impose on others how they insist is the right way to live. And here's how it works. They draw a line around the city, and they say no growth is going to take place outside of that line. Everything's going to be right inside here, and we're going to reorganize everything so we all live in a beautiful, efficient place where we all ride in our bikes, and we walk, and we play with our children, and on and on and on. No growth takes place outside of that. That's what they call urban sprawl. Let me tell you what urban sprawl is. Urban sprawl is your homes, the homes of people who have escaped the cities, and they wanted a place for their children to be able to play. And I will guarantee you, if you could have a video camera on the front door of every one of those new homes in this urban sprawl and these new developments, as the new owners arrive, you know what you're going to see? Smiles, happy people, their new home. And then what happens as these grow up is that you get shopping centers and so forth that grow out that way. And of course, that's the sprawl. Oh, that's horrible. Traffic jams, all that. And what they'll tell you is, well, those new developments are costing all the taxpayers more money. It costs us to build infrastructure. It costs us to be able to control it all. That's an absolute lie. Because every single one of those houses is now paying property taxes that weren't paid before. And those shopping centers, what are they doing? They're supplying the people who live there. But you know what else they're doing? They're providing jobs. And what happens with the people who are working there? They're paying taxes. And that's new taxes. And the businesses pay taxes on business taxes. It's how you build an economy. That's what they call sprawl. The planners, they focus on future housing. It'll be high-rise density, these stack and pack things. It means that the use of private cars will be discouraged in favor of public transportation, bikes and walking. Now, how do they do that? How do they discourage you to drive? Well, the same way they discourage you from living in the rural areas, make it impossible for you to do that. The first thing they start doing is they crowd the streets. They got speed bumps there. Now that we've got these little clown cars that they call energy efficient, and so people are driving along in these things, and they get to these big speed bumps, which they call traffic calming, and then you've got to drive up this side of the bump and down that side of the bump, and and then pretty soon you're thinking, I really don't need to go to the grocery today. I'm going to stay home. Or you ride the bike or you walk. The other thing they do is they start charging taxes, higher taxes, on cars and on gasoline. Miraculously, gasoline prices began to come down from $4 a gallon to about $2 in a lot of places. You know what the reaction was to government? Raise taxes on the gasoline so you don't get any benefit from it, but government does. Isn't that clever? Now, did you know that everyone, if you have new cars, every one of your cars has a little black box in it like an airplane. And it can tell them exactly how many miles you've driven. It can tell when you went over the speed limit, other things. They can tell you all kinds of things. There had been a debate in the Obama administration for several years about taxing every mile you drive. They weren't sure whether it was going to be a federal tax or the states would tax. Oregon became the first state to begin to implement this. Obviously, the decision was made, the states are going to do it. You take your car in for a state inspection or something, and they read your meter and send you a bill for how much you've driven. Then we have, as I said, you have to share the road with public transportation, biking, all that. In many cities, like San Francisco, they are now building residential apartment buildings with no parking lots. That's on purpose, make it more difficult. What are you going to do with a car? New York City has implemented what it calls the progressive street projects. They build more than 400 miles of new bike lanes, and they created a massive pedestrian plaza in Times Square by closing 5 blocks of Broadway to cars. Ever tried to drive in Broadway in New York City? It's already difficult to do. Now 5 blocks are gone. The announced purpose for that was to change the culture. That's what they said. This is why we're doing it. The pedestrian plazas are placed in the center of what were once busy streets, blocking off traffic, and again making it difficult to drive. But here, promised the planners, people can congregate, and they can sit at tables and in and out of doors atmosphere and enjoy each other, and rather than rushing around by themselves in those old nasty smelly cars. One of the leaders of this project said, quote, "What we're trying to do is see equity in public space." There's one of those terms, isn't it? She went on to say, I love this quote, "When you build your streets for cars, you're actually building in the expectation that people are going to have cars." These people get college degrees to think that way. So if you stop having streets, obviously people will stop wanting cars. Then she went on to explain, it costs $10,000 per year for a household to own and maintain a car. We're talking about building an affordable option for people to get around. Social engineering, social justice. And by the way, their option, their affordable option really means raising taxes to build light rail trains, and trolleys are now propping up everywhere. But that's going to save you money. I was working with a gentleman, I was speaking in Atlanta a few years ago, and big deal there was they're going to put this light rail train through the city. This guy did his homework, and he looked at how much they were projecting it would cost and what the ridership was that they were expecting to have. And he did an overlay, and he found out that he could, for that amount of money and that many riders, he could buy a limousine for every single proposed rider on there and supply them with a chauffeur too. Now, let me tell you, if you heard your local officials, how many of you have been to planning meetings or city council meetings, county commission meetings, anything? Have you ever heard them talking about why they do this? That they talk about the chaotic growth of the community. We can't have it. We've got to have a plan so that in the future our community has a sensible plan, right? You've heard this? Listen to this quote. "The chaotic growth of cities will be replaced by a dynamic system of urban settlement. The region is formed by the economic interdependence of its development from the industrial complex to the industrial region. The region has a singular system of transportation." That means theirs, not yours. "A centralized administration and a united system of education and research." That sound familiar? That quote was written in 1968 by an architect named Alexei Gutanov. He was a Soviet-Russian architect, and he was writing in a document entitled "The Ideal Communist City." Could it be that sustainable development, smart growth, really is an extension of the master plan for the ideal communist city? Oh, of course not. Your local elected representatives, planning groups, and planning departments deny any such international connections. It's all local, local, local. We hear Russian, 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 local, local, local. So where will it all lead? 2 decades ago, Portland, Oregon was announced as the poster child for smart growth policy. There it was pretty much fully implemented. Once the ban on suburban development, that urban sprawl, was put into place, there is now a controlled living area. It doesn't grow. What happens when the population of the community does grow? It gets crowded, more densely populated. The only way to grow is up. In Portland, the planners kept upping the density requirements for housing. To increase urban densities, the planners turned dozens of neighborhoods of single-family homes into apartments and condos. Eventually, Portland planners decided that row houses and low-rise apartments were not enough. They changed the rules to enforce the building of high-rise apartment buildings. Pack and stack is what we call them. And I want to tell you now, what happens now after they've gone up? Now, as the population continues to grow, the size of the apartments start to shrink. Eventually, you're going to have a bed and a sink. Oh, that's a prison cell. Yeah. They call them livable, walkable communities. They paint a lovely picture of families and neighborhoods walking to the store, playing in the parks, riding their bikes, playing with their children. A happy, healthy neighborhood, they call it. It's kind of like an 18th century atmosphere with modern technology. Golly, if only the founders had been this smart to think of this. And the center of the plan in Portland was the light rail train system. They said the homes that were built along the system were the desirable homes because this was what was going to eliminate cars from the street, people riding the train. You know what? It's all a lie. The result of Portland's grand plan is that increased density destroyed the local neighborhood atmosphere. Congestion is worse, crime is higher, housing and consumer costs are higher, and urban services such as fire, police, schools actually declined as the city took money from these programs to subsidize the high-density developers. As growth boundaries limit space, few can afford a single-family home, even if there was one. These smart growth economic realities are now forcing low-income and young people out of their ethnic neighborhoods and into public housing programs, as I said, as expensive high-rise condos replace what was once theirs. And they have little hope of getting out of it. Here we have all these people talking to us all about how they really care about the poor and diversity and on and on and on, and all of us are just sitting on white privilege. They don't care about these people. Oregon, in Portland, after decades of smart growth development, exorbitant living costs have driven over 10,000 minority families out of their urban homes. San Francisco, thousands of low-income families have been uprooted, and they put them in, I love that they are so clever with these terms, they move them into preferred development areas. In Seattle, the city government intends to start charging a new construction tax to pay for the government housing. Now that the grants run out, now the local government has to pay for it. What's that going to do? Raise the price of homes even more. As smart growth policies are fully implemented, the only property owners, this is something I realized just recently, as we begin to have these condos building into the community and people are run out that owned homes, there's no private property there. The only private property owners we're going to have in the future are the corporations that own them. And they're going to be in partnership with the government. And that's our future under smart growth. And what's it like to live there? Well, as I said, everything gets smaller. The power companies in partnership with government are now installing smart meters on private homes. These meters give the power company the control over the temperature in your home. They will decide what happens in your thermostat. It's all under the excuse of stopping global warming. And any homeowners trying to stop the installation of them are either met with arrest or loss of power or both. In Montgomery County, Ohio, I was just there last weekend, a lady named Jenny Granado and her family owned a 150-year-old farmhouse. It was along a highway, but they had in front of the house a yard. They had a big hedge there to, block the highway out. Jenny's mom had this beautiful magnolia tree. She had a swing next to it. She loved to sit in that swing and look up at her magnolia tree. It was her favorite place to be. They knew something was coming, but nobody ever told them when or what. One day, Jenny's mother heard a ruckus outside. She went outside just in time to see a bulldozer take out the hedge and the magnolia tree. Jenny's mother was so upset by what she saw, the reaction she had, she grabbed her chest and she keeled over and died. They were putting a bike, what they called a bike path, through their yard. It's not a bike path, it's a bike highway. The purpose of this is to make more and more room for bicycles and less room for cars. That bike highway runs within 7 feet of Jenny's front door. They have literally rendered her home worthless, almost unlivable, and unable to sell it. She went to the county commission and she complained. The county commissioner said, "Oh, we didn't have anything to do with that. It was the planning commission." And so she goes to the planning commission and they said, "Oh, we don't have anything to do with that. We just applied for the grant." No one was responsible. And that is the true reality of regionalism. These non-elected regional councils should never have the power to commit local elected governments to policies or regulations. That's got to be done only by the elected people that you put there. Otherwise, why have the election? Because this is how government is spiraling out of control. The problem is not traditional zoning and planning. The problem is the emergence of raw government power that is unchecked and out of control as it ignores individual liberty and private property rights. Further, we see more and more governments armed with the federal grants imposing these rules and these straitjackets, these one-size-fits-all things. And more power in government leads to more government corruption. So, interesting thing is, a few years ago, the American Planning Association did a study to see if all of their efforts to enforce smart growth worked. Their own study said smart growth does not work. Here's the final concluding paragraph of the APA's study. Quote, "The current planning policy strategies for land use and transportation have virtually no impact on the major long-term increases in resource and energy consumption. They generally tend to increase cost and reduce economic competitiveness. In many cases, the socioeconomic consequences of less housing choices, crowding and congestion may outweigh the very modest CO2 reduction benefits." But is the American Planning Association stopping doing this? Not on your life, because they're getting rich off the grants. Sustainable development is an international scheme disguised as national and local policy created to rein in the radical ideas of individualism, private property, ownership, and harmonize all the nations, that's their word, all nations into a central global control. The goal to control the world. So, how do you fight back? One fact is very, very clear. They will not be able to enforce sustainable development without diminishing or destroying private property rights. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time that we demand a government that treats property owners like owners, not chattel to be pushed around as they like. We stand up for property rights. We can stop sustainable development and put a cork back in government. But we need leaders who understand this, who will act on protecting property rights. But you must understand this, and we're getting very concerned about this. As I've traveled around the country, I've had so many groups that I talk to tell me, "Golly, Tom, we used to have 100, 200 people here tonight, we could only get 25 or 50, whatever." I hear it all the time. What's happening in this country is a lot of people who got fired up about the election of Donald Trump now sit there and saying, "Well, he's going to take care of everything. I can go home now." That's not true. Why am I hugging? I'm sorry, Donald. I didn't mean to say that. What did I do? Okay. The forces pushing the sustainable agenda are deeply entrenched in every city on the local level and are highly organized and massively funded. Now, one of the things that we have to do, we have to fight, we have to make that decision, we have to fight for our homes. You fight for your community. It's going to be trench warfare. Here's the problem with our movement. We want it all now. We want it, we go down, we sign a petition, we go to a meeting, we make a phone call, we write a letter to the editor, and that's it. And then nothing happens. And what do we say? It didn't work. We can't stop them. It's all over. We've lost the republic. The other side understands you're going to do that. They're sitting there going like this. Okay, they're gone. And then they go on with what they're going to do. We need trench warfare to get our country back. Number one, stop your local officials from taking the grants. We've got to put pressure on that. We've got to quit accepting that this is free money or our money. That's a lie. It's not. Number two, we must have clear definitions of what we're talking about, particularly on property rights. The state of Alabama passed a law against Agenda 21, and everybody rejoiced it. Oh, thank goodness, this is the model. It's a complete farce because it doesn't have a definition of what it's talking about. It just says anything coming out of the United Nations you can't do. These guys look at it and go, well, this isn't that. This is all local. Yeah. Let me give you a definition of property rights that I've been using across the country. This was written in the 1990s by a Supreme Court justice in the state of Washington called Richard B. Sanders. That Supreme Court, as sustainable policies were being put in place, they began to realize they didn't have a proper definition of property rights to stand up to these things. So he wrote one, and this is what he wrote. Property in a thing consists not merely in its ownership and possession, but in the unrestricted right of use, enjoyment, and disposal. Anything which destroys any of the elements of property to that extent destroys the property itself. The substantial value of property lies in its use. If the right of use be denied, the value of the property is annihilated and ownership is rendered a barren right. When all you're allowed to do is pay the taxes and the mortgage, you don't have private property, you're a renter. It's a barren right, the right of use to use it. And this is what we have to focus on. Private property ownership and its unrestricted use is the foundation. If we fight for this, it's the foundation for a nationwide revolution of freedom. Start to demand it. So, just keep this in mind. This is a political movement we're fighting. It's nothing to do with protecting the environment. They use the philosophical base of Karl Marx, the tactics of Adolf Hitler, and the rhetoric of the Sierra Club. Basically, everything connected with sustainable development translates to higher costs, shortages, and sacrifice. So what do we do? All right. Are you with me for a couple minutes? I need some help. I'm going to get you involved. I need my assistant. Right there. I need 5 volunteers.
Come on, Tom. Let's go.
I need 5 volunteers. These are non-speaking parts, I assure you.
Let's see, who can I pick that I know? You're good.
Okay.
You're good. There's 3.
All right.
Okay, we need 2 women. Diane Borden, you jumped up here too.
We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay,
There we go.
we got it. Now, just stand right here. Now, what we're going to do is have an election. Come over here. You are a county commissioner. 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 Oh, we got 1 extra. Well, that's okay. I'll need you in a minute. Don't go. That's okay. You are a county commissioner. Now, hang on. Now, people run for office. I mean, you're all active in your communities, right? You're involved. You care what you're doing. Good people run for office. They want to do something in the community. And now, the interesting thing is, you start to feel effects of programs that they're putting together, and you go to your county commissioner, you go to the meeting, they give you this wonderful 3 minutes to address them because they're up here on high. And they're looking down at us, and they grant us that 3 minutes if we're good. Now, if we have a nasty look on our face, they might not call on us, you know. And then you go up there, and now you've heard, you come from this meeting tonight, and you go in there and you're fired up about fighting sustainable development and Agenda 21, and you come in here and say, you guys are implementing Agenda 21 policies, and you got to stop this. And what do you get from them? You get the eye roll and the sigh. And they ignore you and dismiss you. Now, why is that? I need 4 more volunteers. 4 more. I need 4. I got 3 more. Yeah. Okay. 1 more. There we go. Okay. Now, let's do this. You guys come down here. I'm going to need the room here. Stay right there. Come, you guys, commissioners, come down here. Okay?
Gotta keep you guys separate.
Yeah. This is the county courthouse right here. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Now, I got 4. I need 1 more.
Come on, Eric.
Oh, come on, guys. If you can't come up here and do this, how are you going to fight at City Hall?
I need this on you so I can hear.
Okay. Now I got 3, right? Okay. Here we go. You are the American Planning Association. Isn't that lovely? You are the Sierra Club. You actually think you're gods on high, but you're the Sierra Club. You are ICLEI, the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives. As I said, they made it their goal to impose these policies in every single community in the world. I will tell you this. A couple of years ago, when we began to target them and get their name out there, they had 650 American cities paying them dues to come into the community to bring them training programs, to train the employees down at the courthouse and think of sustainable policies and everything that they did. They began to bring this. We began to target that. We got 150 cities to stop paying them dues and rescind this. So ICLEI knows who, and a friend of mine went to an international meeting, and he actually talked to the leader of ICLEI. And he was just playing devil's advocate, and he said, what do you think of all these attacks taking place against ICLEI? He says, oh my gosh, we can't stop them. We're terrified of those people. He wrote me immediately, he said, good job. Now, you are a local environmental group. Now, every community has one. Actually, you'll probably find that there's 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 or 15 or 20 of them. They're covering everything from the bike groups or to the national heritage areas to conservation easements, all that, land trust groups. But we'll just have you represent all that. And in my community, in Virginia, this is called the Piedmont Environmental Council. They control 9 counties in our area. My county is supposed to be a conservative county, but they control the county government. And their people are a lot of the people on those stakeholder councils, a lot of the people on the employees in these places where you're trying to deal with them. They control all of it. We just had an election of the head of the Republican Party to elect the chairman of the Republican Party in the county. Now, this should be a Republican meeting, right? There was this huge line of people to vote. It looked like election day. And people were standing in line going, gee, I've never been to a Republican gathering before. They were all the Piedmont Environmental Council people controlling the Republican Party. This is what happened. That's you. Now, what happens here is, why do these guys give you the eye roll and the sigh and dismiss you? Because of them. Because they're standing behind them. You guys come over here and stand behind them.
Behind them?
Yeah, they've got money, they've got political power, their pet projects can be taken care of. Now, you come up there and you start talking about this, and they're standing behind them saying, don't pay attention, the guy's nuts, don't pay attention to him. Pay no attention to that person. This is why, what you're going to begin to get the picture of, you thought this was your government. I'm going to prove to you otherwise because I need 9 more volunteers. Now this is going to be difficult if you guys won't get up. Come on, 9 more of you.
Look at this go.
Yeah.
Where's your first one?
Good. All right, what do we got here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 2 more. 2 more. We can do this. My goodness. Weren't you ever in theater?
You met the volunteer.
There we go. We got him now? Okay. All right, let's start down here.
Okay.
You are the U.S. Conference of Mayors. And by the way, the U.S. Conference of Mayors is a 501c3 private organization. Isn't that interesting? And they have made sustainable development their #1 issue in implementing it. They made the Kyoto Global Warming Accord one of their major issues. And when we have a new mayor elected, we send him to these guys. And they go to the meetings. And what happens when they get there? They hear these same NGO guys there talking. They even get sample legislation. They tell them, and then they come home and they're met by them again, saying, did you get the sample legislation? Are you ready to implement that? Hey, we got the money for you too. Good going. Yeah. You are the National League of Cities. 501c3 private organization.
How does that work?
Yeah, I'll explain that in a minute. You oppose private property movements across the country because they're in your way.
All right.
You are a member of the National Association of Counties. It's a 501c3 private organization. They provide a framework for counties all across the country implementing these programs. You are the International City Council Management Association, a 501c3 private organization. And what you do is that you promote the concept of council manager instead of city managers instead of a mayor. Isn't that convenient to put all this in place? Good going. You are the National Conference of State Legislatures. You're a 501c3 private organization. And you work to put all those federal funds down into the local communities. Interesting. You are the Council of State Governments, a 501c3 private organization. Wow. And you promote economic development that solves environmental problems caused by growth. Golly. You, oh, my favorite, the National Governors Association. Here you go. A 501c3 private organization. And they have worked to block put these programs in place. They've worked to block requirements for, you wanted to fix welfare benefits and things like that so they're actually workable. They've worked to block that.
Do I have to take it?
Yes, you do. You have been appointed. You are a powerful person.
By who?
Me. You are the Environmental Protection Agency. Under the Obama administration, they have been the sledgehammer for putting all this in place. Control of water, air, control of factories, anything that moves. They have been involved in stopping that from happening and implementing international global warming practices. And they're a major source of the grant programs. And you are housing and urban development. Ditto. The same thing. The major source of this, re-engineering our communities, building, they're moving now to put Section 8 low-income housing into affluent neighborhoods because that's only fair and that's going to solve all the problems. Geniuses. Now what happens, as I said, all of these are 501c3 private organizations. You think they're government organizations. The only reason, except for these two, the only reason these guys have any influence, any power in your community whatsoever is because these guys back here, the county commissioners, give it to them. They're not government agencies, they're private organizations. You have the power to say, get out of town. And we can do that. Oh yeah. I need one more volunteer. One more. As you walk up here, you are taking the walk of shame. Because you are the National Association of Realtors. Any realtors here? Any? No? National Association of Realtors is the largest promoter of smart growth in the country. The one organization that should be there to defend our private property rights above all else is the National Association of Realtors. They have turned their back on private ownership, and what's going to happen is eventually realtors will have no product to sell. I'm trying to start a revolution inside the realtors groups across the country. A few have listened, a few have been shut down instantly. One realtor who heard me talk about this called the National Association of Realtors and found out, they got on the phone with the guy who's supposed to be kind of in charge of the smart growth programs. He knew instantly who I was. She was trying to get me on the line with them. Oh no, I'm going to talk to me. Shame. Now, hang on, I got to get something here. Now there's a couple of other things I don't have cards for, but these are things to watch for. There is an organization called Human Rights City. This is taken from the United Nations Declaration on Human Rights, and its purpose is to impose those ideas into your community. There's another one called What Works Cities. This brings it all in there with grant programs. They're one of the big ones. This is one of the new ones that's coming in, that herd mentality. And then there is a process they're putting in place called form-based codes. Form-based codes are designed to make every single community look exactly alike. Every building is built exactly alike. They're all organized exactly alike. The character of different states, different ideas, not allowed. Form-based codes. Keep your eyes open for those things. Oh yeah, the perfect communist city. Now, so what do we do here? Bring my county commissioners back out here in front. Okay, stand right there. Now, what if we tried something different? As I said, protecting private property rights is the means to stop sustainable development. What if instead of rushing up here and we start yelling, Agenda 21, Agenda 21, what if we did it this way? Ladies, gentlemen, as you're bringing these plans into our community, I just got a question for you. What will you be doing to protect my property rights? Here's what you're going to hear. I've got on video. Oh, of course I will. Hey, I'm a property owner too. And they'll say things like this. And you say, I'm really happy to hear you say that. Smile. But ladies, gentlemen, I'd like to have it in writing, please. This is a resolution to protect citizens' property rights. It says three things. It says, one, if they're going to discuss something that's going to affect my property, they'll bring me into the discussion. There's a radical idea. And then it says, if you go ahead with what you're doing, and it costs me, I've lost something from it, that you will reimburse me at the market level. Well, here's what they do. They decide to take property, and now that it's condemned, well, it's not worth what it used to be. We'll give you 20 cents, here, instead of the dollar, and give it to you at the property at the rate it's supposed to be. Third, it says that in order to make these plans they're talking about, they will not bring their agents, these guys and stuff, onto the property to map it, to take photographs, to make things, without your permission. Really radical, right? We have yet to have a single community sign this. Because here's what happens. As soon as we bring it in, these guys go bat. They go nuts. Oh my God, we can't do this, we can't do this. And they're in their ears telling, stop. Why? Because they know full well that this is what's going to destroy their whole plan if they protect property rights. This is not a tool I mean, not a, I don't want them to sign this. I don't care if they sign it. It'd be nice if they did. But it's a political tool. Because now, first off, when they say they're not going to sign it, here's the first thing you do. You ask them, the most radical word in the English language, why? Now, everything I'm telling you, you cannot do this alone. You have got to have an organization ready to go. You've got to have other people there. You need, when they turn that down, you need to have 10 more people standing in line, proposing it again, saying, why won't you do this? You need to start showing up at the next meetings, put their pictures on a poster and say, why won't they protect my private property rights? You begin to lay the grassroots down to start a campaign to throw them out of office. And I will guarantee you this. You just get one of them out of office. Just get one of them out. And they know why. The other ones are going to go, oh, what happened? And when these guys start pressuring them again, here's what victory is. Here's the victory you want. The victory is that these guys start saying, when these guys propose a plan and they say, I can't do that. You know what my people will do to me? Victory. That's what you have to have happen. You get one or two of them out of office, that'll start to happen. But here's what's got to happen. You've got to be there. You can't go home. You can't leave it. You've got to be there. Rindge, New Hampshire, little tiny, they don't even have a downtown in this town. I was privileged to speak to these people. They didn't know anything about Agenda 21. They didn't know anything about all this. They began to realize something strange was going on in their county government. They began to research it, find out what it was. Within 1 year, they had replaced the entire county government. And the other thing they did, they put in an ordinance that said that these guys cannot apply for a HUD grant until there's a referendum by the people to say they can. They did that. Here's what's got to happen. Everybody stand up. Everybody. When this is proposed and they deny that they're going to sign it, you need to say why. Everybody say why. Why? Say it louder. Why? Louder. Why? That's how your county commission meetings need to sound. That's what you've got to have. You think they won't be shaking in their shoes if you do that? This is our country. This is our ability to take back our country. We can't sit in those seats and let them take it. These guys back here can't stand the light of day on them. We've got to put very bright lights on them. We've got to get county commissioners that will throw them out of town so that you have control of your government. This is the goal. This is what we have to do on the local level, not Congress, here, right here. Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. So, let me just finish this way. Ladies and gentlemen, nameless, faceless bureaucrats wielding power in the back rooms, untouchable and unseen, is not freedom. It can never lead to freedom. And we who oppose Agenda 21 frankly don't accept the premise that we must destroy our human civilization in order to protect the environment. We believe in free markets and free societies where people make their own decisions and develop their own property. And we fully believe that the true path to a strong protection of the environment is through the private property ownership and limited government. Those who promote Agenda 21 don't believe in any of those things. There's no middle ground. Fight like your life depended on it. In fact, I just saw this, it was actually an advertisement for a t-shirt the other day on Facebook, and I thought it was so appropriate. It said on the front, if you're going to fight, fight like you're the third monkey on the ramp of Noah's Ark, and brother, it's starting to rain. Play for keeps. Don't concede a single point when dealing with principle, and start at the local and state level to change things. Because, ladies and gentlemen, I believe with everything in me that if we can protect our private property's ownership on the local level, that we can preserve freedom as a nation. Thank you very much. Oh, I forgot something. I forgot my shameless promotion. I have back there, and I only have a very few of them with me. I apologize, we can get them online. This is my new book. I never wrote fiction before, but this idea came to me when I read an article about Kindle books, e-books, where they have the technology to be able to tell what you're reading, what you're enjoying, so that they can create new ones and build a new a market. Fine. In my mind, I started thinking, what if that technology gets in the wrong hands? And the idea for Erase was created. This is a murder mystery political thriller taking place in the very world I've just described, and I've got 5 very intriguing heroes who fight in whole different areas coming together to fight on this. And this book has been compared over and over and over again to Atlas Shrugged, 1984, and Michael Crichton's State of Fear. Shocks me, but that's what's happened. I have some back here. And my other book, this is my first book, Now Tell Me I Was Wrong. This is a collection of articles I wrote over the last over 15-year period on immigration, on education, on personal privacy, property rights, Agenda 21, that kind of thing. And when I first wrote these things, people said, oh, you're nuts, that's not true. Then I started seeing editorials that looked like I wrote them, and that's when I came up with the title, Now Tell Me I Was Wrong. So have these back here. I hope you'll not make me take them home. Thank you.